All right, let's dive right into today's top stories. And there's a lot happening around the world, from Eastern Europe to the Middle East to South America, even an interesting one from down under. We've got a lot to cover, so let's get started.
Okay, yeah, there's a lot going on. So, kicking things off in Eastern Europe, Trump's been on the phone, separate calls, one to Zelensky, one to Putin. And, well, at least according to Trump, things went pretty smoothly.
Trump actually said it was a very good conversation with Zelensky and that his main goal was to, like, find some kind of common ground so they could at least get a ceasefire going. But, things aren't always as they seem.
Right. I mean, Zelensky came out and flat out denied that Trump was pushing him to just accept Moscow's demands. So obviously there's a bit of, a difference in how these two guys are seeing things.
Yeah, and to make things even more complicated, Zelensky and Putin had supposedly agreed to, stop attacking each other's power grids, but now they're both pointing fingers saying the other guy's breaking the deal.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, Putin basically told Trump, thanks but no thanks to that 30-day ceasefire idea that the U.S. and Ukraine were pushing for.
Yeah, it doesn't really sound like everyone's on the same page about, de-escalating things. But despite all that, Secretary of State Rubio says Trump's agreed to help Ukraine get their hands on more air defense systems. Might even get some from Europe. And get this, they're apparently trying to set up a meeting with some technical folks over in, believe it or not, Saudi Arabia to try and, expand the ceasefire to the Black Sea.
So it sounds like the U.S. is trying to play both sides, right? Like pushing for a wider truce while also making sure Ukraine can, actually defend itself.
Exactly. And Trump even suggested the U.S. should, straight up take over Ukraine's power plants to, protect them better. Kind of wild idea, if you ask me.
Definitely out-of-the-box thinking there. And all this is happening while, by the way, there are reports that Ukraine launched a drone attack on a Russian oil depot in Krasnodar. But amidst all the tension, there was one positive development.
Yeah, both sides, Kyiv and Moscow, went ahead with a big prisoner exchange, 175 POWs each. Zelensky even pointed out that Russia threw in some extra guys who were, seriously hurt. So maybe a sliver of hope there.
A small win in a very messy situation. It is kind of weird, though, right? Like Putin shoots down the ceasefire, but then U.S. officials are out there praising him for, working towards peace.
Yeah, bit of a head scratcher. And of course, Putin laid out what he wants before he'll even think about making peace. No more Western weapons or intel for Ukraine, and Ukraine needs to start mobilizing troops. Basically, he wants them to disarm. If Ukraine agreed to that, they'd be in a really tough spot.
No kidding. And now everyone's wondering, will the U.S. actually pressure Ukraine to give in?
Yeah.
Especially since Russia's dangling some pretty tempting economic carrots.
Right. We're talking possible collaborations on aluminum production and those rare earth minerals everyone's after. One Russian newspaper even said it straight up. They want to make these ties so profitable that the U.S. would think twice before breaking them. So, yeah, now there's this whole economic angle on top of the geopolitical mess.
Complicated doesn't even begin to describe it, and it feels like the whole conversation's flipped. Remember when Ukraine agreed to that unconditional ceasefire?
Yeah.
And the U.S. was all like, okay, Russia, your move?
Yeah.
Well, now Putin's the one calling the shots, and it doesn't seem like he's budging much.
Nope. But at least they're still talking, both about Ukraine and, the whole U.S.-Russia relationship. So got to see where that goes.
Absolutely. All right, shifting gears to the Middle East now. That ceasefire between Gaza and Israel, yeah, that's over. Israel's back in action, and unfortunately, it sounds pretty bad. Gaza's health ministry is saying that over 400 people have been killed in the latest round of strikes.
Yeah. Netanyahu basically came right out and said they were resuming combat in full force, and the IDF is sending ground troops further into Gaza up to the Netzarim corridor. They claim they're going after Hamas military targets, even took out some Hamas boats, but...
The UN's calling it a complete bloodbath. They're saying the intensity of the attacks is way worse than anything they've seen before. The overnight strikes in Khan Yunis and Gaza City, brutal.
It's the worst it's been since that ceasefire back in January. Remember, that deal had 3 phases, but they got stuck on the second one where Israel was supposed to pull out their troops. Talks completely stalled, and they've been stuck there for weeks. Israel and the U.S. wanted to just extend the first part, the hostage for prisoner swap, but...
Netanyahu's changed his tune, hasn't he?
Yep. Now he's saying they have to keep fighting to get the rest of their people back and basically wipe out Hamas.
Problem is, a lot of the hostage families think the government's just given up on them.
Yeah, I can't imagine what they're going through. The latest numbers say Hamas still has 59 hostages, but only 24 of them are believed to be alive. And Egypt's furious. They were a big part of that ceasefire, and now they're calling Israel out for blatantly breaking it. Remember when Israel stopped all the aid from getting into Gaza?
Yeah, people were really worried about that.
And now Netanyahu's saying any future ceasefire talks have to happen under fire, not exactly a recipe for peace. Going back to that initial attack on October 7th, Hamas killed about 1,200 people in Israel and took 251 hostages. The retaliation from Israel has been devastating.
Shifting focus now, things are heating up politically in Turkey after Istanbul's mayor, Ekrem İmamoğlu, was detained.
Yeah, he's a big rival of Erdogan, and now he's facing accusations of corruption and helping out a terrorist group. They're even calling him a criminal organization leader. This is a big deal, especially with the upcoming elections.
Absolutely. Thousands of people have been out in the streets in Istanbul showing their support for İmamoğlu and protesting the whole thing. The government's clamped down hard, banning public gatherings in the city for the next 4 days, and transportation's a mess. But
It's not stopping people. More protests are expected across the country. And Imamoglu himself put out a video message saying he's not backing down.
so, some people are saying this whole situation is a sign of Turkey becoming more authoritarian, and there are even calls to boycott the presidential election because, will it even be fair?
Yeah, there's a lot of doubt about that. Imamoglu's party, the Republican People's Party, are calling this a blatant political attack. Of course, the justice minister denies it, and Erdogan's party insists the courts are independent, but
Come on.
I know, right? This isn't Imamoglu's first run-in with the government either. Remember that political ban they slapped on him? He's appealing that, but there are other investigations too. It's definitely not looking good for him.
So this story is a little bit hard to follow, but it involves multiple countries. It all started with this Venezuelan guy, Francisco Jose Garcia Cacique, who was deported from the U.S.
Okay.
And his mother saw him in a video, like a news report or something, from this mega prison in El Salvador.
This is that secret prison, right, where they sent all those Venezuelans, 238 of them, deported by the U.S.
Exactly. And the U.S. government, under Trump, is saying that every single one of those guys is a member of this game, the Tren de Aragua. But his mother insists that her son is just a barber.
Yeah, I read that. She says there's absolutely no way he's involved in any gang activity. But of course, the U.S. immigration officials are saying everyone they deported was thoroughly vetted, using surveillance, police records, all that. Stephen Miller, you remember him, the deputy White House chief of staff, said it was all about keeping the public safe.
Right. But here's the thing. A lot of those guys that were deported don't even have criminal records in the U.S. And the way they were deported, using this Alien Enemies Act, that's usually something you only see during wartime, they totally bypassed the usual process.
It's pretty alarming.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And, some of them did have records, but the charges were all over the place. Garcia's mother thinks he was targeted because of his tattoos, roses and family names.
Oh, I see.
Apparently, there are a bunch of families saying the same thing, that their loved ones were mistaken for gang members because of tattoos. There's this other guy, Mervin Yamarte. His mom saw him in that prison footage, too, and she swears he's not in a gang.
So this whole thing with using the Alien Enemies Act, it's got a lot of Venezuelans and Venezuelan Americans living in the U.S. really scared. They're worried about being deported without a fair chance to defend themselves.
Yeah.
And on top of that, you've got temporary protected status for Venezuelans about to expire. That's going to affect a ton of people. Even some of Trump's supporters aren't happy about it. It's a really tough situation for a lot of people.
Moving on to Hungary. They've just passed a new law that bans LGBTQ plus pride marches. And it's just the latest move in a string of anti-LGBTQ plus measures they've been pushing through.
It's been going on for a while now. Back in 2020, they abolished legal recognition for transgender people. And then in 2021, they passed that law banning anything depicting homosexuality to minors. Now, with this new law, they're basically saying any gathering that could be seen as breaking that 2021 law is forbidden.
So if you take part or even organize one of these marches, you could be fined. And they're even allowing facial recognition technology to enforce it.
Yeah, it's pretty intense.
The EU is not happy about this at all. Their Equality Commissioner called it out, saying that peaceful assembly is a fundamental right. But the people organizing Budapest Pride, they're not backing down.
No, not at all. They're calling this straight-up fascism, and they say the march will go on in June as planned.
Brave of them to stand up like that, considering Orban's government has been cracking down on anyone who criticizes them, and there's talk of even more conservative laws coming.
Yeah, it's a worrying trend, but there is a glimmer of hope. There's this new party, the Titsa Party, and they're gaining some traction. They're more moderate, want a better relationship with the EU.
Interesting. Okay, let's move on to something a little less heavy. Big news in the aviation world. Malaysia's decided to give that search for MH370 another shot.
Oh, wow, that's huge. They're going to be focusing on a pretty big area, like 15,000 square kilometers down in the southern Indian Ocean. They've got this no find, no fee deal with Ocean Infinity, the company doing the searching. So if they actually find the wreckage, they're getting a massive payout.
Right. It's been years since MH370 disappeared. 239 people on board, gone without a trace. One of the biggest aviation mysteries ever.
Absolutely. They've done so many searches already and nothing. It's heartbreaking for the families.
I can't imagine. The plane just vanished, lost contact, veered way off course. Most people think it crashed somewhere in the southern Indian Ocean, but no one knows for sure.
Some debris has washed up over the years, but it's not much to go on. There have been all sorts of theories, but nothing concrete. An investigation back in 2018 suggested someone might have deliberately messed with the controls, but they never figured out why.
So many unanswered questions. The passengers were from all over, mostly from China and Malaysia, though. I read that the families of the missing Chinese passengers met with officials in Beijing recently, and they're frustrated because they're not getting any direct communication from Malaysia.
Yeah, that's going to be incredibly difficult feeling left in the dark like that. It's been over a decade, and they still have no answers.
Okay, this next story is a bit more lighthearted. Get this, a blobfish has been crowned Fish of the Year by a New Zealand conservation group.
What? That's hilarious.
I know, right? Apparently, this group, the Mountain to Sea Conservation Trust, does this competition every year to raise awareness about New Zealand's amazing marine life. And the blobfish, well, it won by a landslide.
That's fantastic. Remember when it was the mascot for the Ugly Animal Preservation Society?
Yeah.
It's like famously uglier.
And I guess the people of New Zealand have a soft spot for it. You know, when it's deep down in the ocean, it looks like a regular fish because of all that pressure. But when you bring it up to the surface, its body basically melts into this, like, blobby mess.
That's what makes it so unique, I guess.
I guess so. The orange roughy came in second place. But here's the thing. Most of the fish nominated for this award are actually considered vulnerable.
Oh, really?
Yeah, even the blobfish. Deep-sea trawling is a big threat to them.
Mm.
And speaking of quirky New Zealand competitions, have you heard of their Bird of the Year contest?
No, I haven't.
Well, maybe we can look into that for another episode. All right, back to some more serious news. Colombian police just arrested this Italian fugitive, Emanuele Gregorini. They say he's a big shot in the Italian mafia, coordinating cocaine shipments to Europe.
Bro.
Yeah, he's got this nickname, Dollarino. And the Colombian police chief basically called him the head honcho of the Italian mafia in Latin America. They caught him in Cartagena, and it was a big international operation. Italian, British, and Colombian investigators were all involved. He's been on the run since 2023.
They're saying he was a key player in this thing called the Lombardi Mafia system. It's basically a bunch of different Italian mafia groups all working together.
Right, so it's a pretty big deal that they caught him. They say he was the one organizing all the cocaine shipments from Colombian ports to Europe. They even had surveillance footage of him living it up in Cartagena.
Living a double life, huh?
Sounds like it. And prosecutors think this arrest means the Italian mafia has been getting more and more involved in Latin America. There was a report recently that said European criminal networks are setting up their own drug smuggling routes straight out of South America. It's getting pretty sophisticated.
Yeah, definitely not good.
This next story is heartbreaking. The family of this missing American student, Sudiksha Kananki, they're asking to have her declared dead.
Oh, no, that's terrible. Wasn't she that young woman who disappeared while on spring break in the Dominican Republic?
Yeah, 20 years old, student at the University of Pittsburgh. She vanished back on March 6th. The police in the Dominican Republic say they've received the family's request.
I can't imagine what they're going through.
It's been 2 weeks now, and they've been searching everywhere. They think she might have drowned, but they're not ruling out other possibilities.
And what about that guy she was last seen with?
Joshua Rebo. He's 22, also a college student. They haven't accused him of anything. Security cameras caught them walking towards the beach with some friends. Reby says a big wave hit them, swept them out to sea, and he managed to get back, but she didn't.
It's awful.
He was detained for over a week, but they let him go, although they kept his passport. He says he just wants to go home. He even met with Kananki's mother.
That's a very sad story.
The investigators are using everything they can, drones, even AI analysis, searching on land and in the water, but so far, nothing.
It's just so tragic.
China just sentenced this guy, Liu, to life in prison for espionage.
Oh, wow. What'd he do?
He used to work for the government, and they say he was traveling around to all these different countries for 6 months, secretly feeding state secrets to foreign spies.
So he's a full-blown spy.
Yeah, they say he even confessed. Now he's lost all his political rights, too.
Yeah.
China's been really cracking down on espionage lately, warning people about foreign recruitment, all that. Remember that other case where they gave a former state agency employee the death penalty for the same thing?
Yeah, I remember that.
They're not messing around.
No, they're definitely taking it seriously.
Well, there's some good news coming out of the Democratic Republic of Congo, at least potentially. The presidents of DR Congo and Rwanda have apparently agreed to a ceasefire.
That's great news.
Hmm.
Was this part of those peace talks in Angola?
Actually, it was brokered by Qatar. And there's a big question mark over whether the M23 rebels will actually go along with it. They refused to be part of those talks in Angola.
Right, because the whole thing fell apart when they walked out. DR Congo has been accusing Rwanda of arming and supporting those rebels, which Rwanda denies, of course. And Rwanda is accusing DR Congo of illegal mining, which they also deny. It's a very messy situation.
Definitely. But this agreement was a bit of a surprise. The two presidents hadn't exactly been getting along lately, and Rwanda is still pushing for direct talks between DR Congo and the M23.
So it's a step in the right direction, but there's still a long way to go.
Absolutely. It's a very fragile situation.
It always is with these kinds of things.
Back to South Africa now, where there have been some pretty disturbing developments in that trial of Jocelyn Smith's mother. Remember, she's accused of human trafficking and kidnapping after her 6-year-old daughter disappeared.
Yes, I remember that case. It's so awful.
So they're saying in court that Jocelyn was actually wanted by a traditional healer.
Oh, no. Why?
Apparently it was because of her eyes and her fair skin. It's just horrific. Both the mother, her boyfriend, and their friend have all pleaded not guilty to the charges. Jocelyn's been missing since February of last year, and despite all the searches, no one's been able to find her.
That poor little girl.
The mother's story has changed a few times. At first, she said Jocelyn went missing while she was with her boyfriend, but then she started saying that she had, sold, delivered, or exchanged her.
That's chilling.
The trial's been going on for a week now, and some of the details coming out are really disturbing. Like, the police weren't even notified right away that she was missing, and apparently the mother was acting completely calm about it all. A pastor even testified that the mother had talked about selling her children before. And Jocelyn's teacher said the mother told her that Jocelyn was on a ship and on the way to West Africa.
Oh my God. Do they have any idea where she might be now?
Well, they've got this key witness, a friend and neighbor of the mother, and she says the mother actually confessed to her. She said she sold Jocelyn to a Sangoma, which is a traditional healer, for money.
That's just unbelievable.
This friend says she even saw the mother packing Jocelyn's clothes and leaving to meet with this woman who she thinks was the Sangoma.
Do they know who that woman is?
They did arrest someone, but the charges were dropped because they didn't have enough evidence.
So frustrating.
That's so sad. And the witness, she said that the person who took Jocelyn wanted her specifically for her eyes and her skin.
That is just, I don't even know what to say. It's sickening.
I know. And, Sangomas are actually recognized legally in South Africa. They believe that ancestral spirits guide them, all that.
But there are always people who exploit that belief.
Exactly. This witness, she's devastated. She says she tried to talk the mother out of it, but she wouldn't listen.
Just a truly horrific story.
Yeah. And unfortunately, that's not the only tough story coming out of South Africa right now. There's still a lot of anger and resentment about the compensation, or lack thereof, for the victims of apartheid.
It's been decades since apartheid ended, but those wounds are still so raw.
There's this man, Lazuli Sidasi, who had the terrible job of identifying the bodies of his loved ones who were killed by the apartheid regime. He's still dealing with the trauma, and he's struggling financially, even though he got a one-off payment from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission.
It's not enough.
Exactly. And it turns out there's a lot of money that was set aside for reparations that hasn't even been spent. Professor Chippo Madlingozi, he's from the Human Rights Commission, and he says the impact of apartheid is still being felt today. He calls it intergenerational poverty.
It's like a ripple effect.
Exactly. Another victim, Mr. Mthalil, said that the small payment he received felt like a slap in the face. Professor Madlingozi says that, unintentionally, South Africa sent the message that you can commit crimes against humanity and get away with it.
That's a powerful statement.
It is. And Mr. Diassi, he was so hopeful after apartheid ended, but now he's just disappointed. He and many others who fought against apartheid, they need health care, they need help making a living, they need to be part of the economy.
It's like I've been forgotten.
All right, some big news in international relations. Poland and the Baltic states have announced that they're pulling out of the Ottawa Treaty, which bans anti-personnel landmines.
Wow, that's significant. Why are they doing that?
They're saying it's because of the threat from Russia and Belarus. They put out a joint statement, the defense ministers from Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and Poland. They say those threats have significantly increased since they signed the treaty.
I can see their point. It's a different world now than it was back when they joined.
Right. The Ottawa Treaty's been around since 1997, and over 160 countries have signed it, but some of the big military powers, like Russia and the U.S., haven't.
Right.
The Baltic states signed on back in 2005, and Poland joined them in 2012. But now they're saying things have gotten way too dangerous, and they need to be able to defend themselves.
They need that flexibility.
Exactly. But they also said they're still committed to international humanitarian laws and protecting civilians.
It's a tricky situation trying to balance security needs with humanitarian concerns.
It really is. And it's worth pointing out that the treaty actually says you can't withdraw if you're in a war.
Oh, interesting.
And the UN saying that Ukraine is now the most heavily mined country in the world. Okay, over to the North Sea now, where there's been a pretty dramatic collision between a tanker and a cargo ship.
Oh, no. Is everyone okay?
Well, thankfully, most of them are. The co-owners of the tanker, the Stina Immaculate, are praising the crew for their exceptional bravery during the whole ordeal.
So what happened exactly?
The tanker and this cargo ship, the Solong, they smashed into each other off the coast of East Yorkshire. There was a huge explosion and fires, but they managed to put them out.
Thank goodness for that.
Sadly, one of the Solong's crew members, a Filipino man, is still missing and presumed dead. And they've charged the Russian captain of the cargo ship with gross negligence manslaughter.
That's terrible.
It gets even worse. The Solong's owners have admitted that they accidentally spilled a bunch of those tiny plastic pellets, nurdles, into the sea, and they've been washing up on beaches in Lincolnshire and Norfolk.
Oh, no. That's bad news for the environment. How did that happen?
The manager of the tanker posted a picture of 19 of the crew members and said they did an incredible job containing the fire and minimizing the damage. But with all the chaos, some of those nurdles must have escaped. 36 people from both ships were rescued.
That's good to hear.
Right now, they're focusing on cleaning up those nurdles.
How bad are those things for the environment?
Well, they're not toxic, but if wildlife eats them, it can be really dangerous.
Makes sense.
They say both ships are stable, and they're working on salvaging them.
What about the captain that was charged?
He's already appeared in court, and they're keeping him in custody for now. The Marine Accident Investigation Branch is looking into what caused the collision. We're getting reports of a disturbing incident at an Antarctic research base run by South Africa.
Oh, no. What happened?
Sounds like there was an assault of some kind. A team of 9 scientists were supposed to be spending the winter there. A government spokesperson confirmed that there was an assault after some initial reports of inappropriate behavior.
So they're investigating it then?
Yeah, the Environment Ministry says they're treating it very seriously and dealing with it urgently.
Yeah.
And there have even been reports that some of the team members are begging to be rescued.
Wow, that's serious. They must be really scared.
Yeah, it sounds pretty bad. The ministry did say that everyone on the team goes through a thorough vetting process, but sometimes, being stuck in a remote and isolated environment for a long time can cause problems.
Cabin fever can make people do crazy things.
Exactly. The incident was reported on February 27th, and they immediately put their response plan into action. They're also looking into allegations of sexual harassment, although they've said that initial reports of sexual assault were inaccurate.
That's good to hear.
A government minister is personally overseeing the whole thing, and apparently the person accused of the assault is cooperating and has apologized.
Well, that's something at least.
But it sounds like the situation at the base is pretty tense. The base is in a very remote location, and when the weather gets bad, the team can be completely isolated for months. Someone on the team sent an email describing deeply disturbing behavior and an environment of fear.
This sounds like something out of a horror movie.
I know, right? The government's saying that the assault happened because of an argument about a work task, but you have to wonder what kind of pressure cooker environment they're in down there.
Absolutely. It's like a social experiment gone wrong.
This reminds me of that incident at the Russian Antarctic base back in 2018. Remember that?
Yeah, vaguely. What happened?
One of the researchers stabbed another one after he kept spoiling the endings of books.
Oh, wow. That's crazy. It shows you how even small things can escalate when you're stuck together with the same people in a tiny space for a long time.
Exactly. And South Africa has the capability to get people out of there. They've got ice-capable ships and aircraft. So hopefully they'll get everyone back safely.
I hope so too. That whole situation sounds very unsettling.
Okay, this next story is a little bit lighter. Narendra Modi, the Prime Minister of India, has joined Truth Social, Donald Trump's social media platform.
Really? I wonder what his first post was.
It was a photo of him with Trump from back in 2019 when Modi visited the U.S. Remember, Trump started Truth Social after he was banned from all the other big platforms.
Ah, right.
Modi's already got like 21,000 followers, and he's only following Trump and Vice President Vance.
Huh.
And Trump was quick to return the favor. He shared a link to a podcast interview with Modi.
So it's like a mutual admiration society over there.
Kind of. Truth Social is basically a copycat of X with
Yeah.
similar features and all that. But Trump's follower count is way smaller on his own platform compared to his old X account.
Yeah, I haven't heard great things about Truth Social.
It's struggling, to be honest. The engagement is low, and the company's been losing money, even though it's valued pretty high.
It's tough to compete with the established platforms.
It really is. King Charles had a meeting with Canada's new Prime Minister, Mark Carney, at Buckingham Palace. And a lot of people are seeing it as a show of support for Canada, especially with, all the tension with the U.S. under Trump.
That's interesting. So it's more about symbolism than actual policy decisions.
Yeah, it seems that way. The king was supposed to visit Canada this year, but he's been battling cancer, so it probably got postponed. But there's talk that he might visit after Canada's election.
I see. So this meeting is kind of setting the stage for that.
Exactly. Apparently, there was this funny moment where Carney's Order of Canada pin broke, and the king made a joke about it. They had a private chat for about half an hour, and then Carney went off to meet with the UK's Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer. Starmer made a point of emphasizing the strong relationship between the UK and Canada.
Smart move. Show a united front.
Right. And someone asked Carney if he felt let down by the lack of public support from allies, regarding the U.S. But he was pretty diplomatic, just said that Canada is a sovereign nation, and they have a shared sovereign in King Charles III. But, behind the scenes, there's definitely some frustration.
I bet.
But the king's in a tough spot. He can't just go around criticizing other world leaders. He has to follow protocol and stay neutral.
Right. He can't be seen as picking sides.
Exactly. But he's been making these small gestures of support for Canada, wearing Canadian medals, sending a message for the anniversary of their flag, planting a maple tree, that sort of thing.
It's all about symbolism.
And some people think it's not enough,
Yeah, they want him to take a stronger stance.
especially with the possibility of Trump getting back into power. There was even some talk about people being upset that Trump was invited for a state visit.
That's a whole other can of worms.
It is. But the king has to be careful. He has to listen to his ministers and maintain good relationships with everyone, even Trump.
It's a delicate balancing act.
It really is.